Section 4.3, Multiplying Decimals. Multiplying decimals is really no different than multiplying whole numbers. There are just a couple of ideas to keep in mind. Let's say that I wanted to multiply the two decimals 0.32 times 0.2. Before multiplying it as decimals, I want to show you something about multiplying this with fractions. So if I'm going to change these to fractions, I know that 0.32, 32 hundredths, could be written as 32 over 100. I know that 0.2 or 2 tenths could be written as 2 tenths. We talked earlier about multiplying with fractions. We could just multiply straight across if we wanted to. 32 times 2 is 64. 100 times 10 is 1,000. So I get an answer of 64 thousandths. Now, I could put that in lower terms, but I want to leave it like this right now, because now I want to take that 64 thousandths and I want to write it as a decimal. 64 thousandths means that I need, since I'm going out to thousandths place, the number 64, and I have to go out 3 places, so I'm going to need a 0 in the tenths place. So it is 0.064. Often you would see this written with a 0 also in the ones place, so you could say it's 0 and 64 thousandths, which is the same thing. So when we go through and we multiply this as decimals, here it is written as decimals, 0.32 times 0.2. The very first thing you're going to notice is that I did not line up the decimal points. You don't need to line up the decimal points as you are going through and multiplying with decimals, because you're going to figure out where the decimal point goes at the end. So all I'm going to do is write the number, and then I am just going to go through and multiply just like I would normally multiply. 2 times 2 gives me 4. 3 times 2 gives me 6. 0 times 2 gives me 0. So I get a 0.64. I don't need to multiply this 0 right here times anything, because 0 times anything is just going to give me 0. So I just get a 0.64. And I want you to notice that in the very first number, I have 2 digits after the decimal point, the 3 and the 2. And in the second number, I have 1 digit after the decimal point. So I have a total of 3 numbers after the decimal point in the problem. The rule when multiplying decimals is that you have to have the same number of decimals in your answer, the same number of digits, I should say, after the decimal point in your answer as you do in the problem. So since there are 3 numbers after the decimal point in my problem, I need 3 numbers after the decimal point in my answer, which means that I would put my decimal point right before the 0, so I have 3 digits after that decimal point. Once again, lots of times you do put another 0 in front of that, and really that's just so that in case you don't write a very big decimal point, you do know that it's 0.064. Let's look at another example, but this time we're just going to do it straight with decimals. And I'm going to write it up and down, 0.23 times 0.7. And now I'm just going to multiply. I'm going to ignore the decimal points, and I am going to multiply just that 23 times the 7. So when I do that, 7 times 3 gives me 21. I put down the 1. I regroup the 2. 7 times 2 gives me 14, plus 2 gives me 16. I can go 7 times 0 if I want to. I don't really need to, because anything times 0 is 0, but I'll go through and do that. And then once again, there's no reason that I need to go through and multiply 0 times everything, because 0 times anything just gives me 0. So I have that 0.161. Now I just need to figure out where my decimal point goes. Once again, as I take a look at this, there are 3 digits after the decimal point in the problem, the 2, the 3, and the 7. So I need 3 digits after the decimal point in the answer, which means that it would go right there at 0.161. Let's do one more problem, this one a little bit more involved. So I have 24.3 times 5.8. So I'm going to write it up and down again, 24.3 times 5.8. Notice that the decimal points are lined up here, but that's just because that's the way this problem worked out. I did not line them up purposely. Now I'm just going to go through and I'm going to use the multiplication algorithm. So I'm going to multiply the 8 times everything that's on the top. 8 times 3 gives me 24. I put down the 4. I regroup the 2. 8 times 4 gives me 32, plus that 2 gives me 34. I put down the 4. I carry the 3. And 8 times 2 gives me 16, plus 3 gives me 19. So I have 1944 for my very first line. Now notice I didn't put any decimal points or anything like that in. I'm going to do that at the very end. Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to multiply the 5 times everything. 5 times 3 gives me 15. Remember, just like in the multiplication algorithm though, I need to put in a placeholder 0 before I do that. As I said, 5 times 3 is 15. I put down the 5, I regroup the 1, which means I'm going to get rid of that plus 2. Then 5 times 4 gives me 20, plus 1 gives me 21. I put down the 1, and I regroup the 2. 5 times 2 gives me 10, plus 2 gives me 12. So that next line is 12150. Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to add up my digits. So I have a 4, a 9, this gives me 10, 2, 3, 4, and 1. I have 14094. Now I just need to go through and figure out where the decimal point goes. In the problem, I have 2 digits after the decimal points. I have the 3 and I have the 8. So I need 2 digits after the decimal point in the answer, which means the decimal point would have to go between the 0 and the 9, because then I have 2 digits after the decimal point. My final answer is 140.94. There's one more idea to consider in this section, and that is multiplying by powers of 10. By multiplying by powers of 10, I mean that I'm always multiplying a number by a power of 10. You know, 10 to the first power is 10. 10 to the second power is 100. 10 to the third power is 1,000. 10 to the fourth power is 10,000. So that's what I mean by multiplying by a power of 10. Powers of 10 have the digit 1 followed by a certain number of zeros after it. In order to do this, what I would like you to do is I'd like you to jot down these 4 problems that I have up there, and then I'd like you to get a calculator, your phone, or something, and I would like you to go through and multiply each one of these problems. So 2.356 times 10, and then write down the answer on a piece of paper and go all the way through. And then when you are ready, you can start this up again after you have done that. Okay, hopefully you've gone through and put down the answers on your piece of paper to all these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put down the answers that you should have gotten. The first answer would have been 23.56. The next answer would have been 235.6. The next answer would have been 2,356, followed by the last answer of 23,560. Notice that for all of those, the digits stayed exactly the same. The only thing that changed was the placement of the decimal. So let's take a look at the very first one, 2.356 times 10. Notice there is 1 0 in the number 10. And all that happened is the decimal point got moved over 1 place. So it's 23.56. For the second one, there are 2 zeros, and the decimal point got moved over 2 places, so it's 235.6. The next one, there are 3 zeros, and the decimal point got moved over 3 places, and there's an understood decimal after the 6, 2,356. In the last one, there are 4 zeros, and I needed to move that decimal point over 4 places. It is right here right now, and I need to move it over 4 places. 1, 2, 3. Well, in order to move it over another place, I need to put in another 0 so that I can do that. So the answer came up to be 23,560. So anytime at all that you are multiplying a decimal by a power of 10, it's very easy to do. You just need to go through and count the number of zeros in that power of 10 and move the decimal point the same number of spots to the right. Sometimes you might need to add some zeros, as we did in this very last problem, to get the final answer, but multiplying by powers of 10 is easily accomplished by just moving the decimal point. In addition to working on the ideas I have talked about in this video, the homework in this section will also allow you to review the multiplication algorithm, which is something you will need to be able to do both on the next test and on the final. Please let me know if you have any questions.